"I've never been kissed," she said. The giant Lycan king leaned closer and said, "Let's start slow." The villagers of Eldoria had long spoken in hushed tones of the Lycan king, a giant figure who ruled the shadowed northern realm. Few dared venture near his forested domain, and fewer still returned with tales that didn't dissolve into rumor. Yet today, a lone carriage wound its way along the moss-covered road, carrying a young woman whose destiny had already been set in motion. Seraphine adjusted her cloak, feeling the weight of her heart in her chest. She had never been kissed, she thought with a blush, and yet she felt the stirrings of a longing she could not name. The northern journey was meant to be simple: deliver the peace treaty her father, the king of Eldoria, had prepared for Kaelin, the Lycan king, and return. Yet as she glanced out of the carriage window, the forest seemed alive, watching, waiting. The carriage stopped at the edge of a clearing where massive stone gates loomed. Their surfaces were carved with snarling wolves and twisting vines, a reminder of the legends that surrounded this place. Seraphine's escort knocked lightly, and the gates groaned open. "Be careful, my lady," said one of the guards, bowing low. "The Lycan king is not like other rulers. They say his heart is as wild as his form." Seraphine nodded, though her heart beat faster than nerves alone could explain. She stepped onto the cobblestones, her boots echoing softly in the vast silence. The palace before her was unlike anything she had seen. Its towers stretched toward the sky, wrapped in dark ivy that seemed to pulse under the pale light of the rising moon. There was beauty in its gloom, yet something about it made her chest tighten with awe and fear. A shadow moved in the moonlight, taller than any man should be. Seraphine froze as the figure stepped forward. Kaelin, the Lycan king, regarded her with eyes that glowed faintly like molten amber. His presence was immense, both powerful and magnetic, and Seraphine felt the tug of 1,000 unspoken stories in his gaze. "Welcome, Lady Seraphine," he said, his voice low and measured, carrying a weight that made the air seem heavier. "The journey from your kingdom must have been long." "It was safe enough," Seraphine replied, bowing slightly. Her voice sounded small in the cavernous hall, though she tried to steady herself. There was something about Kaelin that made words falter as soon as they left her lips. He inclined his head, silent for a long moment. Then he gestured for her to follow. The halls of his palace were vast, lined with statues of wolves in mid-leap, their stone eyes seeming to track her movement. Torches flickered against the walls, casting shadows that danced like living spirits. "Do not be afraid of the shadows," Kaelin said, as though reading her thoughts. "They are only reminders of the past, of what this court has seen." Seraphine swallowed. "Your court, it seems, lonely." Kaelin's jaw tightened, and he turned toward a balcony overlooking the dark forest. "Lonely," he echoed. "Perhaps, but it is better to be alone than to be betrayed." She followed his gaze to the moonlit treetops. The branches swayed as if alive, whispering secrets only they could understand. Seraphine felt a strange pull, as though the forest itself acknowledged her presence and waited for her to step fully into this strange world. The first dinner with Kaelin was quiet. Servants brought food, though neither spoke much of it. Seraphine's thoughts wandered as she watched him eat with precise, controlled movements, every gesture revealing a discipline that seemed to struggle against something more primal within him. She realized that the tales were not exaggerations. There was something otherworldly about him, something that set him apart from all kings she had ever known. When their eyes met across the table, her pulse quickened. There was an unspoken understanding in that gaze, as if he could see her deepest fears, her secret hopes. She looked down, cheeks burning, and tried to focus on her plate, but the awareness of his attention made the air around her feel electric. After dinner, Kaelin led her to a balcony overlooking the forest. The moon hung low and red in the sky, casting a glow that made the snow-dusted trees shimmer. "Do you see the moon?" he asked quietly. "It controls more than the tides. It controls much of what I am." Seraphine looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I am bound by a curse," he said, his voice a whisper that seemed to float over the wind. "One that I did not choose, one that has haunted my family for generations. The Lycan's spirit, it is mine and not mine at the same time." She felt a shiver run through her. She had heard stories, whispers of the Lycan King's transformation under the full moon, but hearing it from him made it real, immediate. And yet, as fear touched her, there was also a strange fascination, an irresistible pull. "Are you dangerous?" she asked, voice barely audible. Kalen stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing, though his expression remained unreadable. "Dangerous," he echoed softly. "Perhaps, but danger does not always come from the body. Sometimes it comes from what you feel and what you refuse to acknowledge." Seraphine's breath caught. Her heart raced with an emotion she could not name, fear, curiosity, longing, all tangled together. And for the first time in her life, she felt that someone truly saw her, not as a noble woman but as a person, fragile and strong all at once. "Do you ever wonder if someone could see past it all?" she asked, surprising herself. Kaelin's amber eyes softened, and for a moment the monstrous aura seemed to fade, replaced by something human and achingly lonely. "Every day," he said, "every single day. And yet, I do not know if that is possible." The wind rustled the trees below, carrying the distant howl of wolves. Seraphine instinctively shivered and drew her cloak tighter. Kaelin, noticing, offered his hand, a gesture both terrifying and tender. "Fear does not have to control you," he said. "Step closer. Learn the rhythm of the shadows. Sometimes the unknown is not your enemy but your guide." Her hand hovered over his, caught between hesitation and desire. For reasons she could not explain, she wanted to trust him, to step fully into the world he ruled, to see both the man and the monster he had become. Before she could decide, a sudden rustling from the forest below caught her attention. The hairs on her neck stood up and her pulse quickened. Kaelin stiffened, eyes narrowing as he listened. The wind carried a sound, low and menacing, though no figure appeared. "Stay behind me," he commanded softly, his presence protective yet commanding. There was no fear in his voice, only the weight of authority and something deeper, something primal. The moment stretched, tension crackling in the moonlight. Seraphine's heart pounded in her chest. She did not know what the night held, but she knew she was no longer the same person who had arrived. The world she had thought simple and safe had been replaced by a place where shadows whispered, hearts were tested, and the line between fear and desire blurred. Kaelin turned back to her, closer now than ever, his hand still extended, waiting. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice low and intimate. Seraphine met his gaze, and for a heartbeat she felt the pull of something ancient, something wild and eternal. "I want to," she admitted, the words trembling but true. Kaelin's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile, and he stepped even closer. "Then let us begin," he murmured, the words carrying both promise and warning. "Slowly, one step at a time." The wind swirled around them, carrying the scent of pine, snow, and something wilder, something that made the air feel electric. Seraphine took his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, the warmth, the pulse of life, and perhaps the stirrings of something more. As the moon climbed higher, casting silver light across the northern forest, a single thought settled in Seraphine's mind. She had never been kissed. And yet, standing here, hand in hand with the Lycan King, she felt as if her life had only just begun. A howl echoed from deep within the forest, a sound both warning and invitation. Kaelin's amber eyes gleamed in response, and Seraphine knew with a thrill and a shiver that the night had only just begun, and with it their story. The morning sun barely touched the northern palace, its pale light brushing the icy spires and gilded towers. Inside, the halls were quiet, filled only with the echo of Seraphine's footsteps as she walked beside Kaelin. The previous night's moonlit encounter lingered in her mind like a half-remembered dream, every glance and every word of his still warm against her skin. Kalen walked beside her, tall and commanding, his amber eyes scanning the halls with cautious precision. Though he had allowed her to touch the shadows of his palace, to step closer than most ever dared, the weight of the Lycan king's presence was impossible to ignore. Seraphine could feel the tension in the air, a mixture of danger and longing, as if the walls themselves recognized the energy between them. "You must understand," Kalen said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "this court is unlike yours. Here, loyalty is earned through courage, not birthright, and betrayal is often hidden in plain sight." Seraphine glanced at him, feeling the sharp edge of his words. "I have lived my life following rules," she admitted. "But perhaps there is courage in knowing when to follow your heart." Kalen's gaze lingered on her, and for a moment the feral edge softened. "Your heart is not like others I have met. It is stubborn, yes, but honest. That may be both your strength and your danger." They entered a vast hall where tapestries depicted the history of Kalen's lineage, battles fought under the moon, and kings who had succumbed to the curse of the Lycan. Seraphine felt a shiver run down her spine. The paintings were more than decoration. They were warnings, stories of power, and tragedies written in flesh and shadow. "Your family," she began cautiously. "The curse, it is real," Kalen nodded, a shadow passing over his features. "I do not wish to frighten you. But the blood of my ancestors flows through me as both a gift and a prison. Every full moon the Lycan stirs within me. I must control it or it will control me." Seraphine's curiosity overcame fear. "And have you ever failed?" The corners of Kalen's mouth tightened. "Many times. Every failure is a lesson, but every lesson comes with pain. Pain that I cannot always protect others from." The honesty in his voice touched her, and she realized that beneath the fearsome reputation and towering presence, Kalen carried a loneliness deeper than any forest could hide. She wanted to reach out, to touch that loneliness and reassure him that he was seen, that he was understood. Before she could act on the impulse, a servant entered, bowing low. "My king, Lady Seraphine," he said, "your presence is requested in the council chamber. There are matters of the realm that require your attention." Kalen inclined his head. "Go, I will meet you there." The council chamber was colder, more formal, and filled with advisors whose faces carried suspicion and subtle cunning. Seraphine felt the weight of their scrutiny, the way they measured her as if she were both a tool and a threat. She realized that diplomacy in Kalen's court was a dance as intricate as any battle fought with swords. During the discussion, Kalen observed her closely, his eyes sharp and calculating. He noticed the way she listened, her patience, her questions, and her subtle but unyielding courage. Even as she was surrounded by intrigue and veiled hostility, Seraphine remained composed. At one point, an advisor leaned forward, questioning her intentions, testing her loyalty. "Do you truly understand the nature of the Northern Kingdom? The Lycan's curse is not just legend, it is a danger. Can you trust yourself here?" Seraphine met his gaze calmly. "I may not understand everything," she said softly, "but I know the difference between fear and courage. I will not falter because others doubt me." Kalen's hand rested lightly on her shoulder under the table, an anchor and a shield. The brief touch sent a shiver down her spine, a reminder of the unspoken connection that stretched between them. After the council, Kalen led her back through the halls to the moonlit balcony she had visited the previous night. Snowflakes drifted silently, catching the silver light and sparkling like tiny stars. "Every choice here has consequences," Kalen said, his voice low and almost reverent in the stillness. "Even the smallest action can ripple through this court, changing the lives of everyone beneath my rule. And yet," he paused, eyes locking with hers, "even amidst duty there is room for something else." Seraphine's heart fluttered. Something else. He stepped closer, closer than propriety or fear might allow. "Connection, trust, perhaps love. These are dangerous in their own way, but they are as real as the moon above us." For a moment, silence hung between them. The wind whispered, carrying the scent of pine and frost. Seraphine's hand twitched, wanting to reach out, wanting to bridge the space between them, but she held herself back, aware of the unspoken rules that governed both their worlds. "You are different from anyone I have ever met," Kalen said, his voice almost a whisper now. "Most are afraid of what I am, but you do not run." Seraphine looked down, cheeks warming. I do not know if I am brave," she admitted, "but I do know that I want to understand. I want to see the person, not just the legend." Kalen's amber eyes softened and he extended his hand. "Then take a step into the shadows with me, slowly, one step at a time." She hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. His grip was strong but not overbearing, guiding without forcing. Together they leaned against the balcony railing, looking out over the forest that stretched like a sea of silver and shadow. "Do you hear it?" Kalen asked. Seraphine tilted her head. "The wind?" Kalen shook his head slightly. "The forest, it speaks, it watches, it knows. And sometimes it tests those who walk within its boundaries." A sudden rustle in the trees made Seraphine jump. Her hand tightened around his, but Kalen's calm presence steadied her. "Do not fear," he murmured. "The forest does not harm those it trusts." Seraphine's pulse raced, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She realized that every moment with Kalen was a test of her courage, but also a lesson in herself, who she was, what she could feel, and how deeply her heart could respond. Night fell and the moon rose once again, this time full and golden. They moved to the inner gardens, where frost-covered flowers sparkled like diamonds beneath the moonlight. Kalen walked beside her, his steps measured, yet there was a grace in the way he moved, even as shadows seemed to cling to him like a cloak. "Tell me about your life," Kalen said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. Seraphine smiled faintly. "It is not as exciting as yours, I imagine. I have spent most of my days in the palace, studying, learning etiquette, and preparing for a life I did not choose." Kalen nodded. "And yet, here you are, stepping into a world far stranger than any lesson could prepare you for. That is courage." She looked at him, really looked, noticing the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the subtle way he held himself back even when no one was watching. "And you," she said softly, "do you ever wish you were free of the curse?" Kalen's gaze darkened, reflecting the moonlight like molten gold. "Every day," he admitted. "But freedom is not always granted. Sometimes we must make our own peace with the burdens we carry. Sometimes we must find light in the darkness." Seraphine felt a warmth spread through her chest. She wanted to be that light for him, to show him that even in shadows there could be trust, and even in curses there could be love. They walked in silence, letting the cold night air fill their lungs, letting the quiet understanding grow between them. And yet the forest held secrets, whispers of danger that neither of them could fully see. A sudden sound, a sharp crack of ice breaking, made Seraphine stumble slightly. Kalen's hand shot out, steadying her. His amber eyes scanned the darkness, alert, every muscle tense. "Stay close," he said, his voice low and protective. "There are forces in this forest that do not wish us well. We must remain vigilant." Seraphine nodded, feeling both fear and a strange thrill. The danger was real, yet in Kalen's presence, she felt safe in a way she had never known. Her heart was no longer hers alone. It beat in time with his, a rhythm she had not anticipated but could not resist. They reached a fountain at the center of the gardens, its waters frozen in a delicate sculpture of ice. Kalen rested a hand lightly on the stone, and Seraphine followed his gaze upward to the moon. "Do you trust me?" he asked again, echoing the words from their first night. Seraphine met his eyes, feeling the pull of something ancient and undeniable. "Yes," she whispered, "I do." Kalen's expression softened, a mixture of relief and something deeper, almost tender. "Then we begin," he murmured, "the dance of shadows, slowly, one step at a time." And as the moonlight bathed them in silver, a figure watched from the forest edge, hidden among the trees. a presence that belonged to the past, to secrets Kalen had hoped were buried forever, lingered, unseen yet palpable. The night held its breath, and Seraphine felt the thrill of anticipation and danger, knowing that their journey had only just begun. The northern forest stretched endlessly under the cold silver light of the full moon. Frost clung to the branches, sparkling like tiny diamonds, and the wind carried whispers that seemed almost alive. Seraphine followed Kalen, her hand brushing his as they moved along the winding path. Each step seemed to echo with unspoken words, promises and fears mingling in the moonlit shadows. Kalen's amber eyes scanned the darkness with a caution that never left him. The northern woods were alive with secrets, and the Lycan king knew them all. He moved with a grace that belied his immense size, each step calculated, silent, and powerful. Seraphine felt her heart race, not with fear, but with awe, admiration, and something more she had not dared to name. "Why bring me out here?" she asked softly, her breath visible in the cold air. Kalen paused, turning toward her. The moonlight illuminated the sharp planes of his face, highlighting the tension that never seemed to leave his jaw. "Because the court is not the only world," he said. "There are truths hidden in the shadows, lessons the palace cannot teach. You must see them for yourself." Seraphine nodded, curiosity overcoming her caution. She trusted him in a way she had never trusted anyone before. The forest around them seemed to respond, the branches swaying gently as if bowing to the strange bond forming between them. They reached a clearing where the moonlight fell like a silver curtain, revealing an ancient stone circle. Cracks ran through the stones and moss covered their edges, yet there was a sense of power here, a history of events both magical and tragic. "This place," Seraphine whispered, feeling a shiver run down her spine. "It feels alive." Kalen's expression softened, almost tender. "It is alive. These stones have witnessed generations of my family, the battles, the triumphs, and the curses that came with them. They hold memories and warnings." He stepped closer to the center of the circle, and Seraphine followed, feeling both awe and a thrill she could not resist. She sensed that this night would change everything, though she did not know how. Kalen knelt by one of the stones, his fingers brushing the frost. "The curse," he said quietly, "is not just my burden. It is a shadow that has followed my family for centuries. It teaches cruelty, power, and isolation. Yet it also tests loyalty, courage, and love. Some fail and some survive changed." Seraphine watched him carefully. "And have you survived?" He looked up at her, amber eyes glowing with the reflection of the moon. "I have survived," he admitted, "but not without scars, some visible, some hidden, some I hope no one will ever see." A silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where words were unnecessary, where presence alone communicated everything. Seraphine felt her hand inch toward his, wanting to offer comfort, to connect in a way that words could not express. Before she could touch him, a rustle came from the trees at the edge of the clearing. Kalen's body tensed instantly, every muscle coiled like a spring. Seraphine felt her pulse quicken, a mix of fear and excitement. He moved toward the sound, his steps silent, and she followed, her courage bolstered by his presence. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was one of Kalen's own advisors, a man whose loyalty had been questionable since her arrival. His eyes darted nervously and he lowered his gaze before Kalen could speak. "My king," he said, voice shaking slightly, "there is something in the forest, something ancient." Kalen studied him carefully, then turned his gaze to Seraphine. "Stay here," he commanded softly. "Do not move." Seraphine's chest tightened, but she nodded. She wanted to protest, to follow, yet she trusted him enough to obey. She watched him step into the shadows, moving with an ease that made her feel both safe and exposed. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. The forest was quiet, save for the whisper of wind through the trees. Seraphine's mind wandered, her thoughts returning to the moments they had shared. The first night on the balcony, the council chamber, the moonlit gardens. Every glance, every touch had been a lesson in trust, desire, and restraint. Kalen returned, his expression unreadable but his eyes softer when they met hers. "It is nothing to fear," he said. "A test, perhaps, or a warning. The forest is patient and it watches those who enter it." Seraphine exhaled, feeling the tension leave her body. "You make it sound so magical," she said, smiling faintly. Kalen allowed himself a small smile. "Perhaps it is," he murmured. "Or perhaps it is a reflection of what we carry inside. Shadows, fears, hopes." As they walked back toward the palace, Seraphine felt a shift within herself. She realized that the fear she had felt at first was being replaced by something else, a courage she had not known, a connection that went beyond admiration or curiosity. She was beginning to understand Kalen, not just as the Lycan king, but as a man, complex and haunted, yet capable of great tenderness. Inside the palace, they entered a room lined with books and scrolls, a place where Kalen studied the history and magic of his lineage. He gestured for her to sit. "Knowledge is power," he said, "and understanding is the key to controlling what cannot be fought with strength alone. Tonight, you will learn more than you expected." Seraphine leaned forward, eager to absorb everything he shared. They spoke of the curse, the legends of the Lycan, and the choices that had led Kalen to rule his kingdom alone. Every story, every confession, drew them closer, building a bond founded on trust and the acknowledgement of shared humanity. Hours passed and the fire in the hearth cast a warm glow against the cold walls. Kalen paused, looking at her with a depth of feeling that made Seraphine's heart ache with longing. "You are different from anyone I have ever met," he said quietly. "Most would fear the shadows. You embrace them, not blindly but with courage and understanding. That is rare." Seraphine's eyes softened. "I am learning," she said, "from you, and perhaps I am learning about myself too." A silence fell, filled with the unspoken tension that had been building between them since her arrival. Seraphine felt her hand inch closer to his, her fingers brushing against the sleeve of his coat. He noticed, and for a moment he did not move, allowing the space to linger, allowing the connection to grow without words. "You do not have to fear me," he murmured. "I will not hurt you, not unless you wish to be hurt, and even then it will be my choice, not mine alone." Seraphine's breath caught, and she realized that she trusted him completely, in a way that frightened and thrilled her. Her heart pounded as the moonlight from the window illuminated the room, casting silver shadows that danced around them. Just as she was about to speak, a sudden knock at the door startled them. Kalen's body tensed instantly. "Stay here," he commanded softly, moving toward the door with the same silent grace that had kept him alive through centuries of danger. The door opened slowly, and one of the palace guards entered, bowing low. "My king, Lady Seraphine," he said, his voice strained. "A message from the southern border, urgent news." Kalen took the scroll from the guard, breaking the seal with a swift motion. His amber eyes scanned the words quickly and his jaw tightened. "This is troubling," he muttered, his tone grave. Seraphine felt a chill run down her spine. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A faction loyal to the old kings is moving against us," Kalen said, his expression hardening. "They believe the Lycan king's rule is a curse and they seek to claim the throne. We must prepare." Her heart raced. "And what about me?" Kalen stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are safe with me," he said firmly. "But danger is coming and you must be ready. Trust is not enough. We must act with courage, intelligence, and restraint." As he spoke, Seraphine realized that their bond was about to be tested in ways neither of them had imagined. The palace, the forest, even the shadows themselves would challenge them. And yet, in the presence of the Lycan king, she felt stronger, braver, and more alive than ever before. Kalen looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Tonight, you will see what it means to stand beside me," he said. not just as an envoy but as someone who is willing to face the darkness together. The moon outside rose higher, casting a silver glow over the palace and the forest beyond. Seraphine took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the night, the anticipation, and the unknown. Her hand rested lightly on Kaelin's, a promise of trust, courage, and connection. "Together," she whispered. Kaelin's amber eyes softened, and for the first time the shadows around him seemed less menacing, almost protective. "Together," he repeated, his voice low and certain. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying whispers of secrets, warnings, and possibilities. Somewhere in the distance, a shadow moved, watching and waiting. But for the first time, Seraphine and Kaelin were not afraid. They faced the night side by side, their hearts beating in unison, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The night stretched on, filled with tension, trust, and a deepening connection. And as they stood together, facing the unknown, Seraphine realized that the heart of the beast was not the curse, nor the strength, nor the fear. It was the choice to embrace love, courage, and redemption, even in the darkest shadows. The blood moon rose high above the northern forest, casting a crimson glow over the palace and the frozen landscape beyond. The light was haunting, beautiful, and terrifying all at once, painting the world in shades of fire and shadow. Seraphine stood at the balcony, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, watching the trees sway in the cold wind. Her heart pounded, not from fear but anticipation. Tonight would test them both in ways neither could fully predict. Kaelin approached silently, his shadow stretching long across the balcony. The amber of his eyes reflected the moon, intense and unyielding, yet softened by the presence of the woman he had come to trust, perhaps even love. "The moon is full," Kaelin said, his voice low and steady, "and with it comes the height of the curse. It will test me and it will test you. We must remain strong together." Seraphine took a deep breath. "I am ready," she said. "Whatever comes, I will face it with you." Kaelin studied her, searching her eyes as if measuring her courage, her resolve. "You do not know how much this means to me," he said quietly. "To have someone who stands beside me, not in fear but in trust, it is rare." A breeze carried the scent of frost and pine through the balcony. Seraphine felt it stir something deep within her, an unspoken promise, a tether between them that neither curse nor shadow could sever. The palace had fallen silent. Servants and guards were gone, tucked safely behind locked doors. Only the wind, the trees, and the distant call of wolves filled the night. Kaelin and Seraphine moved to the center of the balcony, the crimson light of the moon bathing them. "Tonight," Kaelin said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, "the curse reaches its peak. I will need all of my control to resist it, but there is something I must try, something I have never dared before." Seraphine's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Kaelin stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers. "Trust," he said simply. "I need you to trust me fully. Not just as your king or as a Lycan, but as the man I am beneath it all." Seraphine nodded, her hand resting in his. "I trust you," she said, her voice firm yet soft. "I trust you with my heart and with my courage." The moment stretched, electric and quiet, as if the forest itself had paused to watch. Then, with a deep inhale, Kaelin allowed the Lycan within him to stir, not freely but carefully, controlled by years of discipline, and by the trust he had placed in Seraphine. His body shivered, a subtle change, not monstrous but powerful. She felt the energy radiating from him, a pulse of strength and emotion that was almost overwhelming. "Stay close," Kaelin murmured. "I will need your presence, your calm, your courage." Seraphine's grip on his hand tightened. "I am here," she said. "I will not leave you." For a moment the crimson moonlight seemed to dance across them, painting their shadows together as one. Kaelin took a slow, steady breath and turned his eyes to hers. "Do you see me?" he asked. "Not the Lycan, not the king, but me, the man beneath the curse." Seraphine's lips curved into a small, sincere smile. "I see you," she said, and I see what is good in you even in the shadows. I see strength, courage, and love." Kaelin's amber eyes softened, and for the first time in centuries, the wild edge of the curse seemed almost manageable, tempered by the presence of someone who truly understood him. He drew her closer, careful, measured, until their foreheads touched, the warmth of their breath mingling in the cold night. "You have no idea," Kaelin whispered, his voice almost broken with emotion, "how much it means to feel human, to feel seen, to feel loved." Seraphine tilted her head, her lips brushing against his cheek. "I am here," she said, "and I am not going anywhere. You do not have to face this alone." Kaelin closed his eyes, drawing strength from her presence. For the first time, the beast within him did not roar for domination or destruction. Instead, it waited, listening, controlled, tethered by trust and love. The curse, the centuries of pain, the isolation, they all existed, but they were no longer insurmountable. Suddenly, a sound broke the stillness. From the edge of the forest, movement stirred, a shadow dark and deliberate. Kaelin stiffened, amber eyes glowing brighter, muscles tensing. Seraphine felt the pulse of fear, but she did not retreat. She was grounded by the connection she shared with him. "Someone is coming," Kaelin murmured. "It is time." From the shadows, figures emerged, messengers of the faction that sought to challenge Kaelin's rule. They carried not weapons, but intentions. Eyes narrowed, whispers sharp, their presence alone was a test of the king's resolve and Seraphine's courage. Kaelin stepped forward, hands still gripping Seraphine's. "Do not be afraid," he said firmly. "We face this together." The intruders paused, sensing the strength and power radiating from Kaelin. Yet they did not retreat. Instead, they spoke, voices low but clear, carrying accusations and demands. "The Lycan king is not fit to rule," one said. "The curse taints everything he touches." Kaelin's gaze hardened. "I am not only the Lycan king," he said, voice steady and commanding. "I am a ruler, a protector, and a man who has earned the right to guide this kingdom. The curse does not define me. My choices do." Seraphine felt the power in his words, the certainty that had come from centuries of struggle. And in that moment, she understood fully that love, trust, and courage were stronger than fear or curses. One of the figures stepped forward, more daring than the rest. Kaelin's hand tightened around Seraphine's. "Stay behind me," he warned softly, but Seraphine did not move. "No," she said firmly. "I am here with you. Whatever comes, we face it together." Kaelin's eyes softened, amber glowing in the crimson light. "Then be ready," he said, and together they stepped forward, the light of the blood moon casting long, intertwined shadows of king and woman, Lycan and human, love and courage. The confrontation was tense, words sharp, hearts racing. Yet Kaelin remained calm, measured, commanding without threat. Seraphine realized that true power was not in the curse, nor in the claws, but in restraint, in the choice to face danger without losing oneself. Hours passed, though time seemed suspended beneath the blood moon. The intruders tested Kaelin's patience, tried to provoke him, but his control remained steady, anchored by Seraphine's presence and the knowledge that love could temper even the fiercest shadow. Finally, the figures withdrew, recognizing the strength of a bond they could not break. Kaelin watched them go, eyes still glowing but calmer now. Seraphine breathed deeply, her hand still in his, heart swelling with pride and relief. "You have faced the curse," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. "And you did not falter." Kaelin turned to her, amber eyes warm and alive. "And I did not falter because you were here," he said. "You are my anchor, Seraphine, my strength, my courage, my hope." A silence settled, gentle and profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the frozen trees. Seraphine felt the bond between them solidify, an unspoken promise that no darkness, curse, or shadow could undo. Finally, Kaelin leaned close, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You have earned this," he murmured. And then, under the crimson light of the blood moon, their lips met in a slow, deliberate kiss, not just a kiss of desire, but of trust, redemption, and the merging of two hearts that had found each other against the weight of shadows. Time seemed to pause. The moonlight shimmered across the balcony, casting silver and red over them, painting a portrait of love, courage, and hope. Seraphine felt the warmth of his presence, the power restrained and controlled, the humanity shining through the beast, and she realized that this moment was not just a beginning, but a transformation of him, of her, and of the bond that would guide them forward. When they finally parted, Kalen's forehead rested against hers. "The curse is still here," he said softly, "but it no longer controls me, and it never will because you showed me another way. Love, trust, hope." Seraphine smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "And I will always stand with you," she whispered, "through shadow and light, through fear and strength." The blood moon slowly descended, casting softer light across the palace and forest. For the first time in centuries, Kalen felt a weight lift from his shoulders, replaced by something far more powerful than the curse: redemption. And as the night gave way to the first hints of dawn, the Lycan king and the woman who had never been kissed, until this moment, stood together, their hearts united, ready to face the world, its dangers and its wonders, side by side.